Hi, Jamie Cowen here to talk to you today about is the sky really falling? Once upon a time there was a little chicken and everybody called him Chicken Little. And one day while he was walking up in the sky, a bird flew over and it dropped an acorn. And the acorn fell down and bopped him on the head. And Chicken Little said, "Awk!" and looked up and didn't see anything. And he looked down and he didn't see anything. So he said, "Help, help, the sky is falling. Help, help, the sky is falling. I have to tell the king." And he went running down the road looking for the king. And as he was running, he met Henny Penny. And Henny Penny said, "Buck, buck, 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 hello, Chicken Little, what's wrong with you?" And Chicken Little said, "Oh, Henny Penny, haven't you heard? The sky is falling. I'm looking for the king." And Henny Penny said, "Buck, buck, buck. Oh, how exciting. Can I go too?" And they went down the road together shouting, "Help, help, the sky is falling. Help, help, the sky is falling. We have to tell the king." Now, of course, this is from the well-known children's story of Chicken Little. Depending upon the version, Chicken Little and his friends experience different outcomes, but in the original, they are all lured into the lair of Foxy, Loxy, and eaten. Now, I have to be honest, in listening to many evangelical leaders describe the condition of the United States, particularly if the Democrats prevail in the November election, they sound a lot like Chicken Little. Here are some examples from leading evangelicals, quoting them. Quote, "We are destroying ourselves, especially here in America. We are on the verge of tearing apart at the seams. And as I have warned in recent days, we stand on the precipice of a very dangerous cultural shift. Falling over this cliff, it will be almost impossible to find our way back." And another, "In all of our years, we faced all kinds of struggles. The only time we faced an existential struggle like this was in the Civil War and in the Revolution when the nation began. We are on the verge of losing it as we could have lost it in the Civil War." Another, "The Democrats hated Christians long before Trump came along. Years ago, they were trying to get every preacher off the air. They made it their mission to ban prayer in public events and even Friday night football. They are the ones who wanted the 10 Commandments taken down in every park and building. They are the ones who banished nativity displays at Christmas time." And another, "Every group pushing anti-biblical aberrations finds a home in the Democratic Party." Wow, now that does sound bad, if it were true. But tell that to the majority of Catholics who likely will support the Democratic ticket in November. But then again, they're Catholic and we know about them. How about the vast majority of Black Christian and Black evangelicals who will vote Democrat, as the recently deceased John Lewis would have had he survived? Well, they're Black and still fighting for civil rights. They're really not standing up for the gospel. So then, who believes the sky is falling? White evangelicals, and I underline the adjective white. Doesn't that say something about this group? Maybe the dominant culture fears losing their dominant position. Is the sky really falling? I mentioned in past videos that the party controlling the White House has switched between the Republican and Democratic parties continuously. I remember the 1992 election while I was leading the congregation in Richmond, Virginia. After Bill Clinton was elected, one family said they were considering moving to Chile. Somehow, the U.S. survived 8 years under the Clinton administration in the 90s and another 8 years under the more recent Obama administration. So if the sky didn't fall then, why now? Sure, there have been cultural shifts. Far smaller percentages of people attend religious institutions now than in the recent past, although that was also true of different periods in American history. Abortion has been legal for almost 50 years, although the number of abortions has shrunk dramatically in the last 30 years, no matter who was in the White House. 2/3 of Americans support same-sex marriage. Is that likely to change? A conservative Supreme Court ruled that employment discrimination against LGBTQ people was a violation of civil rights laws. But if you listen to the sky is falling crowd, the next step is shutting down religious institutions, the taking over the government by communists, the breaking down of law and order, and thus the end of American society. This sounds remarkably similar to Senator Joe McCarthy in the 1950s, leading to the so-called Red Scare, where many lives were ruined by his accusations of communists lurking everywhere in the American government. Here's a quote from him. "Today, we are engaged in a final all-out battle between communistic atheism and Christianity. The modern champions of communism have selected this as the time. And ladies and gentlemen, the chips are down. They are truly down." Doesn't this sound remarkably similar to the accusations of a deep state today in the federal government? Yet, when all was said and done, McCarthy was exposed as a fraud. But let's say it's all true. That is what the doomsayers proclaim. Let's say it's going to be true. Then what? In 1949, China was conquered by the Communist Revolution, when Mao Zedong's army defeated the nationalists led by Chiang Kai-shek. Estimates at the time showed about 4 million Christians in the country. Today, that number exceeds 100 million, and that under a communist regime. At the time of the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979, it was estimated that there were around 500 Christians in the country. Today, that number exceeds 1 million, all under an oppressive Islamic regime. Is there a pattern here? Yeshua said, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Rather than fighting a cultural war, maybe the evangelical leaders should do what their religious forebears did, and that is preach the gospel. The Great Awakening of the 18th century occurred during a time in American history when the idea of secular rationalism was being emphasized and the passion for religion had grown stale. Sound familiar? In response, Christian leaders traveled from town to town, preaching the gospel and igniting a religious revival that swept the country, whose effects are felt to this very day. Rather than trying to uphold the 1950s model of U.S. society, how about trying to transform a 2020 American society by the Yeshua model of the first century? Isn't it interesting that the Bible says Yeshua is the same yesterday, today, and forever? He and his message are just as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. Let's face it, people are suffering. In the U.S. alone, almost 200,000 lives have been lost to a disease still out of control. Healthcare workers are exhausted. The healthcare system is on the verge of collapse. Tens of millions of people are out of work. Hunger is dramatically escalating. Businesses are closing. Cities are under siege. Isn't this the time for love, compassion, kindness, service, and outreach? Rather than spewing hate and doom, how about what the Apostle James says? The wisdom that comes down from above is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace raise a harvest of righteousness. Now, who can argue with that? Isn't this what we want? Let's get out of the business of politicizing the gospel with culture wars, making it sound like the sky is falling, and into the business of healing the nation. Thank you, and see you next time.